Blessing of the Lord be upon you.
We bless you in the name of the Lord.
Thank you, Doc. Yeah. Mark chapter 5. Sorry, Karen. I told her, she asked me if it was going to be 6, and I told her the right story. Mark chapter 5, verse 21 through 29. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live. And he went with him, and a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, If I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. The title of our lesson today is Crossing Boundaries at Home. And you know, last week we talked about just crossing boundaries, how that Jesus had gone to the land of the Gerasenes and cast the demons out of the demoniac. So this is just a little bit different, because over the past 40 years, believe me, 40 years, it will be 40 years next spring that I've been preaching. I've spoken numerous times on this passage, and invariably the subject of the matter rests solely on faith, the faith of Jairus and the faith of this woman. And faith projected by them are great lessons to us, but that's not the only lessons that we can pull out of a passage like this. Why is this event recorded in Mark's Gospel, and what contextually is Jesus doing? Context, flow of the narrative. What is going on here? What's Jesus trying to get his disciples to understand? And by getting them to understand it, what is he trying to also get us to understand? And here we go again. It's a typical Markan Sandwich, right? Jesus is teaching his apostles that his faith-based kingdom is deeply relational and crosses boundaries. We talked a little bit about that last week, but it doesn't matter if you're crossing the sea or on the shores of home. Sometimes we've got to cross boundaries right here at home. Sometimes in our homes. So that's what we're talking about this morning. Mark chapter 5, verse 21. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Remember, Jesus had taken the apostles across the sea to a land foreign to their culture and customs. On the way, they encountered a terrible storm, right? That it threatened their lives. They thought their lives were in danger. Well, it could have been, but Jesus was teaching them a lesson about faith, that he was there, they should be trusting him, he was calm. He told them, their faith, basically told them their faith needed to grow. He was teaching them that faith would prepare them for the further storms of life. There are going to be storms in life. What was it we said? I beg your pardon. I didn't promise you a rose garden. Jesus doesn't promise us a rose garden, but he promises us that he will get us through the storms of life to eternal life. Their first encounter in the Gentile land was a man possessed by a legion of demons. That would be scary, right? Yeah. Jesus was teaching them that the gospel can change the most hopeless of people. The ones that we deem the most hopeless, the gospel can change them. Sometimes the people that we look at and say, hey, there's a good candidate, we can barely get through to them for whatever reason. But the most hopeless sometimes are the ones who will listen and hear and be changed. That's what happened when they crossed the border to that Gentile land. They witnessed Jesus, which is strange, refusing to take a believer with him. How many times does Jesus say, come and follow me? Pick up your cross, come and follow me. He told the rich young ruler, sell everything that you have, give it to the poor, come follow me. And he tells the apostles, as he's come follow me, come follow me. But this demoniac, he takes the demons out of them. He begs Jesus, please take me with you. No, you stay here. Go tell your family and your friends. How many friends is that guy going to have in Decapolis? But he goes, he goes, right? I thought if we prayed and we begged Jesus for something, that he's always going to give it to us. See, people who don't read the Bible, don't know the Bible, will come up with something like that. Jesus always does. He doesn't always give us what we ask for. He gives us something that is good for us and good for the kingdom. Jesus was teaching them that the gospel can change the most hopeless people. Jesus wanted him to stay at home and tell everyone what Jesus, had done for him. That echoes the encounter with the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4, right? He meets her at the well, tells her stuff, and she says, you must be a prophet. She runs into town, tells the town, I met this man that told me about my life. That's what the Messiah would do. The whole town comes out, right? Later on, we're going to talk about Jesus going to his own hometown. They won't even listen to him. They don't want to hear him. After the resurrection, preachers are going to go to Samaria, where that woman was, especially who? Philip. He's going to preach the gospel up there. He's going to have success there. Their preachers are going to go to this land of the Gerasenes. They're going to talk about Jesus. He's the one that healed that guy over there. You won't believe that guy. He was naked. He was in the tombs, and we couldn't control him. And Jesus cast demons. I want to hear more about that Jesus fellow. That was years later. But you see what was going on. There was a harvest that was going to take place later. In our past, as the church, when the church grew the strongest, back where I come from, Karen comes from, every holler and every ridge had churches on them. Okay? Small little churches, sometimes about the size of us here. But every spring and every fall they have gospel meetings. And after the gospel meetings, the preacher would send a report to some of the gospel papers, that would be sent out to people. People would advertise for them, or subscribe to them. They'd send them, this preacher held this meeting at Skunk Hollow or Gopher Ridge or wherever, And we were there for 2 weeks and we baptized 10 people. Well, we were over here and we baptized 5 and restored 6. And the church just growing and growing. And why was that? Well, it was because for 6 months, the members had been teaching their neighbors and their family members. And when the preacher came and held the gospel meeting, they'd invite those people, and they would come. And the gospel preacher preached the message, a little more forceful maybe, but in that week or 2 weeks period, the concentration of it, there'd be a great revival, so to speak, great ministry taking place. It's hard to get congregations to attend gospel meetings anymore. Nobody wants to give up a week's time for a gospel meeting. Let's see what was happening here. Go teach these people so that when the time comes, when the gospel is finally presented after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, and it comes to that community, there's going to be a great harvest of souls. Well, for the apostles, I imagine that they were relieved that they finally got out of the land of the Gerasenes, got in the boat, crossed the Sea of Galilee, back to their home. No storms this time. They get on the shore. Sigh of relief, right? We are back home. Boy, things are going to be good. Last part of verse 21, a great crowd gathered around him or about him, and he was beside the sea. Not he was beside the sea and a great crowd gathered about him. Notice that. A great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Right here at home, in their own land, their own culture, living by their own customs, there were storms, there was chaos, there were demons. Right there at home. Satan was at work and seemed to be winning. God's sheep had gone astray and were wandering about without a shepherd. Apostles, disciples of Jesus Christ, what ought we to do? What would Jesus do? That's what we ought to do, right? What would Jesus do? Well, what did Jesus do? In the text we see the woman with the issue of blood was healed, and Jairus' daughter, who was sick and died before Jesus could get to her, was resurrected, right? And we know that we can't do miracles like Jesus did, but what was Jesus trying to teach his apostles about serving as his disciples? What message was Jesus trying to get across to them? What message Jesus trying to get across to us? Well, the message the Holy Spirit's trying to get across to us even today. Teaching through encounter. Teaching through encounter. Ministry as embodied compassion. Now here's the question. I read through that passage, didn't I? Where's the sermon? Where's the sermon? Where did Jesus stop and say, hey, here's my sermon? It wasn't a sermon. Wait a minute, let's sit down for a half-hour Bible study here. Wasn't a half-hour Bible study. What did he do? He ministered. He doesn't deliver a sermon, doesn't do a Bible study. He simply embodies ministry. He responds to an urgent need. That's Jairus' plea. And then a hidden suffering, the bleeding woman. He interrupts his journey to engage personally. He had things to do. Jesus was a busy person. He had things, he had a crowd around him. He had to take care of the crowd, the masses say, showing that discipleship isn't about destination. It's about presence. Discipleship isn't about where you're going, it's about where we're at. Does that make sense? He touches the untouchable and raises the dead, modeling that love and healing transcends purity, laws, and social norms. Jesus broke the law? Not necessarily. It was purity laws. Okay? But what did we learn about the Sabbath not too long ago? Sabbath wasn't made for man. Or man wasn't made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for the man. Right? This teaches the apostles that discipleship isn't confined to the synagogue. Discipleship isn't confined to the temple. In our language, discipleship is not confined to the church building. Because we're not always present at the church building. We're present wherever we are in our walk of life. It happens in the streets, it happens in our homes, and it happens in moments of interruption. Every now and then, I'll be on the way to services, and I'll stop and help somebody along the road. I've changed tires. Stopped one night, a couple young ladies and a baby alongside the road. Lights flashing. They're standing out there. I thought they had a flat tire. I turned around, looked around, come back. The car just stopped on them. I said, you know, mine did that one time. You know, it's been, hybrid. Said the battery, this, that, whatever, stopped, pulled over. Started right back up again. Did you try starting it again? No. So after a little while, she got in, started up, took off. You know. But I held. But I was going to Bible study that time. The other time I was going to worship service. I had a destination to get to, but and I'm not saying that doesn't make me any better or worse. Or you understand what I'm saying? Life is full of interruptions now. Now there are some times when I won't stop. Okay? Because usually my wife's saying, don't stop. Sometimes I just don't because I see situations that, but anyway, there are times when you do. But here's the point. Here's the point. Jesus crosses boundaries. Let's look at the boundaries he crosses here. Jairus was a respected synagogue leader. He was a male. He's named. He was privileged, probably rich, fancy house. The woman, female, ritually unclean, financially destitute because she spent all her money on doctors, physicians who couldn't help her, probably had very few friends. She probably run through them as they tried to help her and nothing would work. But she's unclean, so they couldn't be around her. You see the two differences there? You got the upper scale and the lower scale going on. A man would not allow a woman to touch him in public, let alone one with a bleeding disorder, a bleeding disease. Jairus comes, falls at Jesus' feet, pleading for his daughter's life, and that reflects humility and faith, doesn't it? He was probably one who was opposing Jesus in the synagogue. He might have been one who was following Jesus around, saying, you can't do that on the Sabbath day. You shouldn't be doing that. You're against Moses. See? Starts out. But when he has a need, or at least his daughter has a need, oh, it's a little different story now, right? The woman believes that just touching Jesus' garment will heal her. It's a radical act of faith and courage. You don't walk up behind somebody and touch them. At least you shouldn't. She did. The woman believes that just touching Jesus' garment will heal her. Her private approach to Jesus leads to public acknowledgement. Who touched me? He knew. She knew. But she needed to say something. Like, I'm sorry. But her faith had made her whole. The woman's private approach to Jesus leads to that public acknowledgement, while Jairus' public approach leads to a private healing of the daughter, right? Because they go to Jairus' house. She's dead. There's no use coming here. Jesus goes in, just takes what? Peter, James, and John, and the Father. Private. You see the difference? Public to private. And with the woman, it's private to public. Jairus is a religious leader who probably disputed with Jesus in the synagogue and on the streets of Capernaum. Now he can go back to the synagogue and glorify the Son of God because his daughter has been raised from the dead and he was there to witness it. He might lose his position. They might fire him, kick him out of the synagogue. He doesn't care. He shouldn't care, right? The woman who had been unclean and prohibited from entering the synagogue for at least 12 years, she hadn't been to church for 12 years. Now she can go to the synagogue and do what? Glorify the Son of God. See the differences? You see how crossing the boundaries there produces what? The same result. What a wonderful thing. There's a sermon here. Jesus as a mentor is modeling discipleship. And if we're the disciples of Jesus, we need to learn what he mentored. He's mentoring us. Faith, the gospel is the seed, and faith is the fruit God desires, right? We've learned about the seed. Faith is the seed, but the fruit, faith is the fruit God desires. That's what he wants in everybody, but he particularly wants it in us. Faith transcends status. Jairus was a ruler of the synagogue, and the woman had not been to church for 12 years. Now through faith they could rejoice together. Romans chapter 10, verse 17, what does that tell us? So faith comes from hearing, hearing through the word of Christ. Both of them can now teach about Christ, right? Discipleship is telling people about Jesus. What's Jesus done for you? Discipleship transcends status. It crosses those boundaries. What do we see when we see another person? Do we break people down on social status? Do we see male and female? Do we see rich and poor? Do we see perfect and flawed? What do we see? Or do we see precious souls in need of a Savior? Do we see precious souls in need of faith? Discipleship is about seeing people as Jesus sees people. How did Jesus see people? He saw women. He saw a woman. What did she have? That Samaritan woman, 7 husbands, and the man that she's living with now isn't her husband. And this woman hadn't been to church in 12 years because she's got this disease. But he saw her, and he saw this ruler of the synagogue. Didn't make any difference to Jesus. Discipleship is working on Jesus' schedule. His schedule. What's his schedule? I don't think he had really too much of a schedule, except they were saying, like times when he said, I need to be in Jerusalem for this feast. But the reason he went to Jerusalem for the feast was, number one, that's how you honor God as an Israelite, as a Jew. But second, that's where the people were going to be gathered, and he could really teach and preach there and do some things. But Jesus starts with Jairus, right? He's going to go with Jairus to heal Jairus' daughter, and this woman interrupts him. So what does he do? He takes care of the need of the woman, and then completes the work of Jairus. That's like working on Jesus' schedule. Discipleship is a way of life, incorporating everything Jesus calls us to be. Discipleship is not doing one thing that Jesus asks his followers to do to the exclusion of everything else. Right? Jesus asked me to do this, so all this other stuff that Jesus asked his disciples to do, I don't have to worry about. I'll concentrate on this one thing, right? Right? That'd be okay, right? Oh, look at Luke chapter 11, verse 42. But woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and every herb, and neglect justice and the love of God. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. They were good at picking out one thing and neglecting everything else, and that's not discipleship. Discipleship is doing everything. Look, there may be some things that we do well and some things that we don't do very well, maybe even some things that we do badly, but we ought to be doing everything that we're asked to do. You know what Jesus said? You can walk and chew gum at the same time. Well, yeah, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. Okay? You can be a disciple of Jesus Christ, doing everything that he asks us to do because he empowers you. So where are we at? Mark chapter 6, verse 1. There's chapter 6. I knew we were going to get to chapter 6. He went away from there, from Capernaum. Remember, he left Capernaum, going to the land of the Gerasenes, cast the demons, or dealt with the demoniac, okay? Comes back across the sea to Capernaum, does what we talked about today. He's going to go to his hometown, Nazareth. He goes there and his disciples follow him. In the first century Jewish context, to follow a rabbi meant more than physical movement. It meant adopting his way of life, his teachings, and his mission. That's what it means to follow Jesus. In the 21st century, if we are his disciples, or to be disciples of Jesus, we also must adopt his way of life, teaching, and mission. Why? John chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through crossing boundaries. Very important. Cross them at home. Cross them wherever you are. Wherever you're present, Jesus is there to empower you as his disciple. Thank you for your time and your attention. If you have a need, please let your request be made known as you stand and sing the invitation song.